Hey guys, welcome to Twin Flicks, a film channel for film lovers like yourself. I'm Paul, and today we're going to be discussing the biggest surprise out of Super Bowl Sunday, and that is Netflix dropping the third installment to the Cloverfield franchise with Cloverfield Paradox. Originally, it was titled Cloverfield the God Particle, and the God Particle is actually a real thing called the Higgs Boson, which I'll be explaining a lot more in depth later on. Now, after the film was released, there was a lot of confusion the next day and very disappointed fans of the Cloverfield franchise, and which is understandable. Many were disappointed, feeling that this promised to answer every question from the last two films, but it created way more questions than answers, along with it being very confusing. So today we're going to dig deep into the film, analyze it, and explain not just the ending, but also the whole multi-universe thing, what happened, and how everything does tie into the previous two films. But before we explain the ending, we need to start from the beginning. The film takes place in the future as the world's energy is running out and will be completely depleted in just a few years. But as a safety net, the government created an international space station named Cloverfield that holds the key to saving Earth and can give Earth an unlimited supply of energy. The space station was built by a major corporation named Taguato, which is also the same company that was blamed for drilling under the water, along with the falling satellite waking up the Cloverfield monsters that we saw in the first film. Taguato also sends the Cloverfield station into space to save Earth. Now, Taguato and the crew is warned by a professor. He warns that using a tremendous power source from the power cell through the accelerator can blast open doorways to other dimensions and altering reality everywhere. As we see, the professor continues saying that it can unleash monsters, demons, or beasts from the sea, which we saw in the first Cloverfield movie. This is where Paradox also ties into the second film, as we see the reporter here is really the same actress who tried to break into the bunker in 10 Cloverfield Lane. But now the question comes up, is this the same character in Cloverfield Lane? And there's actually evidence that proves otherwise, as I'll be getting into later. Also, I noticed the name of the professor in the newscast is Mark Stampler. Now, is this the same as John Goodman's character in 10 Cloverfield Lane, Howard Stampler? Now, true, this could just be a relative or just coincidence, but when you look at the facts that Howard is obsessed with aliens invading Earth, the paranormal, and monsters, and he also worked on satellites for Taguato, it can't just be a coincidence in the movie. So now the question comes up, are these the same people in 10 Cloverfield Lane? Well, kinda, sort of. These people are instead different variations of the same person in an alternate dimension, as all the films exist in the same timeline but in parallel dimensions, which I'll be expanding on much more later. The crew is now arming the accelerator to fire for the 47th time. The previous attempts failed, and their mission is extending to almost 700 days. However, this time it absolutely works, creating positive energy. But the energy becomes highly unstable as it continues to grow, overloading the accelerator, causing a problem within the God particle itself. And then gravity is lost throughout the ship, the crew panics, and this is where we see a quick blur outside the window of the station, and then everything just stops. When the crew comes to, all they see is empty space, exclaiming, "Earth has vanished completely." However, it's not that Earth has vanished, instead it's the space station that vanished by jumping through a dimensional doorway created by the God particle. They then find a woman trapped inside a wall. The woman later reveals herself to be Jensen and says that she is part of the crew, yet no one knows who she is. But she knows who they are except for Tam, who ends up having the same position on the space station crew as Jensen does in her dimension. Now I'm going to be referring to the space station crew as our dimension and Jensen as Jensen's dimension. So Jensen finds out that the crew is the same crew on the exact same mission, but the only difference is being Tam. Confused yet? Don't worry, just hang in there, it'll all make sense later. Another difference in our timeline that Jensen is now in is that Tam was successful at getting the accelerator to work, while Jensen in her timeline was not. Jensen also exclaims that Ava was not part of the crew, which means that in Jensen's dimension, Ava must have been part of the ground crew of Cloverfield, not on the ship, because she didn't want to leave her family, as we find out later. While in our dimension, Ava's children were killed in a power cell accident, leaving Ava guilt-ridden and leaving Earth with really no reason to stay. Now this is what happened, but put very simply. The God particle, again, which is actually a real thing, you can look it up online. It's also known throughout the scientific community as Higgs boson. So the Higgs boson, or the God particle, was built and embedded inside the accelerator. And when a massive bolt of power hits the God particle, it ignites and changes particle mass that can be harnessed and used to sustain unlimited energy that can be used down on Earth. The power instead overloaded the God particle, causing it to explode and leak outside the station, where it completely changed all particle mass in the universe. Essentially, it made a rip in the space-time continuum, opening a doorway to another dimension, with both dimensions, ours and Jensen's, colliding together, which is why Jensen was found on the space station in our dimension. She just ended up having bad luck by being transported inside of a wall. It also creates unstable particle fields inside the ship itself, such as when Mundy's arm gets trapped into the wall. But now what's with the crawling hand and it writing down a clue for the crew? Well, I'll get into that, and it's really cool. But now back on Earth, Ava's husband, who's a doctor, is waken up by explosions or bombings outside. And when he's on his way to the hospital, he pulls over and sees the city has been completely destroyed. Then he sees a large silhouette of a creature or a monster walking through the rubble. Even though we never see a clear shot of the monster, it does stand to reason that this is the same monster from the first Cloverfield movie. And this is when the crew starts going through all these crazy things and deaths. What's happening is that since different dimensions are colliding with each other, the universe knows that they don't belong in that dimension. And so the universe is trying to repair the dimensional tear and close the doorway by ridding any foreign object or person that doesn't belong there. Now it starts off with Volkov, who feels something crawling around inside his skin that makes his eyelid move all weird. Later we find out it's because worms were inside his body. The universe used the worms like a parasite, kind of controlling his thoughts and actions, by him creating a gun out of a 3D printer and threatening Schmidt. Now if you pay attention, he starts accusing Schmidt of working for the German government. And while he wasn't working for the German government in our dimension, in Jensen's dimension, Schmidt was. What's happening now is that the universe is changing the station's reality to fit in its universe. The example of this is in the crew photo. Jensen is now there in place of Tam. And later the crew finds logs of Schmidt's involvement with the German government. But these logs belong to the Jensen's dimension, not in our dimension. But when the crew discovers the files, they believe it's completely true and lock Schmidt up, while Schmidt has absolutely no idea what they're talking about. Everyone, in a sense, is being influenced by the changes, and that's why everyone blindly believes it to be true. Now going back to Volkov, after he collapses, they take him to sickbay where he flatlines, when worms shoot out of his mouth. Now the question rises, how the worms got into his stomach in the first place. The only thing I can figure out is somehow when things from both dimensions collided together, the worms from our dimension ended up on Jensen's ship, and the worms on Jensen's ship came over, and the universe used the worms to influence him. But again, that's just my own speculation. I honestly don't have any proof of that. Now we're going to go back to Mundy's arm and trapped in the wall. Mundy is repairing the wall where they found Jensen, and since the material of the ship is being alternated to fit its reality, when Mundy sticks his hand into the wall to repair it, he actually reaches into the other dimension where Jensen came from, and then he becomes trapped. After the crew gets Mundy out of the wall, his arm is completely gone. It's detached. When the arm finally appears and it starts crawling towards them, this is when Schmidt talks more about the paradox that has been created between the two dimensions. Both dimensions are now interacting with each other between two distinct realities, butting heads with each other to occupy the same space or reality. Later, Schmidt figures out their only hope is to ignite the accelerator again and undo this mess sending them back home and closing the doorways, repairing the damage that they had done. But they need a new power accelerator that's been unused. Luckily, Mundy's arm knows where to find one, inside Volkov's stomach. After they install the new power cell and map out their surroundings, this is when they realize Earth isn't gone. They just couldn't see it because they are actually on the opposite side of the sun. But this Earth isn't their Earth, it's Jensen's version of Earth. As we saw, Jensen's ship crash down into the ocean, killing everyone, creating a worldwide conflict among the nations with no survival or hope for the planet. But Tam comes to the rescue when she figures out a formula to reset the accelerator to use it to get back to our dimensional Earth. Unfortunately, Tam is killed when she is trapped in an airlock and water starts pouring in, bursting the hatch open, sucking everything into space, freezing Tam and the water. However, Jensen, who is Tam's counterpart in her dimension, says that she will help if the crew gives her the working formula and Schmidt's classified files to take back with her to save her own planet. They agree and set out to prep the accelerator, but the ship's reality is still changing, and as the power comes on, it causes the walls around Mundy to become magnetic, including the repair putty he was using, and the ship uses this against Mundy, turning the putty into a magnetic liquid, stretching towards Mundy, eventually covering over him, attaching him to the wall. A CO2 tank explodes, destroying part of the space station, and with this piece of the station missing, the station's rotation becomes extremely unstable, causing the station to start breaking apart. They have to manually release the damaged area, and he sacrifices himself by detaching the rings, opening the door, saving the station. Now, even though Jensen has the formula, she starts going absolutely bonkers, turning on the crew. Now, at first I didn't know what to make of this, but it stands to reason that the universe is now influencing Jensen to correct the abnormalities of that reality. Jensen kills Monk with a gun, then turns the gun on Schmidt, blaming him for killing her crew. Schmidt distracts her, allowing Ava to get away. Jensen shoots Schmidt and then goes after Ava. After Ava distracts Jensen by playing a video of her family, allowing Ava to shoot the screen, cracking the window into outer space, sucking Jensen into space. Ava and Schmidt now fire up the accelerator, and there's a blur just like the type of blur that we saw in the beginning of the movie. And they are now back seeing Earth outside their window and hearing a message from Mission Control. They fire up the accelerator again, this time using Tam's formula, and now they're able to get back online, which produces a power source, but this time the power source is stable, allowing the God particle to harness the energy and use it as unlimited energy to save Earth. But the damage is already done. As we saw earlier, the monsters are already on Earth. Ava and Schmidt take an escape pod, unaware of the monsters now inhabiting Earth, as they lost contact with Mission Control before they could be informed not to come to Earth. When Ava's husband hears this, he pleads through the radio to the station not to come down to Earth because there are things. But it's too late, as we see the escape pod falling towards Earth, breaking through the cloud line when suddenly a giant Cloverfield monster breaks through the clouds. Now, a lot of people are thinking this is what we saw at the end of the first Cloverfield movie, with the object falling from the clouds crashing into the ocean. But remember, this is not the same Earth as we saw in the 2008 film. Remember, the monster in that film came after the object fell from the sky. Also, there was absolutely no mention of any kind of energy crisis, plus the fact we were already told that it was a satellite that fell, not a ship. So no, the Earth in the first Cloverfield was a different Earth inside an alternate dimension. The same with 10 Cloverfield Lane. All three films take place within 3 alternate dimensions. And in 2028, where the source of the event took place, it changed Earth the most, with what looks like numerous monsters appearing all at once, which is why the Cloverfield monster at the end is much taller than the 2008 monster. I did rewatch the 2008 Cloverfield, and they do confirm that the monster shown in that film was a baby. So it's reasonable that this could be a fully grown adult monster. So again, in conclusion, it was the cause of the 2028 power accelerator overloading the God particle, ripping the fabrics of the space-time continuum that opened up different doorways to other dimensions, changing the reality of those dimensions. and permanently changing all three of the dimensions that we see in all three of the films. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it made sense, and I hope it clarified a lot of different questions that you had about Cloverfield Paradox. Now, if you've been following me on Twitter and Instagram, you know that I did a lot of research on this. Also guys, let me know in the comment section what you thought of the movie Cloverfield Paradox. And before we go, I wanted to give a huge shout out to our two new Patreons, Bob Logan and Mike Vane. Thanks for watching guys, and for supporting our channel, and we'll see you next time.